I wanted to follow up the introduction with a short introduction as well about Georgia's practice, which is constantly evolving. Oh, that's better. And I think you'll see in our talk how she's really always searching for moments of uncertainty and experimentation in her practice as a way to explore. I like something that she referred to as what makes an object come to life, and amongst other questions that we'll get into. And that is maybe a great place to start with this exhibition that takes us into a kind of alien seascape and or the sea around us.
Yeah.
And so I think Georgia has something she wants to share. We're very prepared.
Sorry. Yeah, that's working. Yeah, it's okay. The title of the show, The Sea Around Us, is a book by Rachel Carson. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with Rachel Carson and her books. I discovered them a few years ago now and have not stopped being inspired by them since. This show, The Sea Around Us, seemed to strike home with me because I had, for my last show in January with Karsten, been using a lot of water, pouring water, having buckets of water, puddles of water. And not only was there lots of water in the studio, but there was this sea of strange news and political things happening, environmental things happening, one thing after another over the last 2 or 3 years. It seemed to be getting as if we were floating around in flotsam and jetsam and not quite knowing what direction to go in, which is also true with my creative process, which is, I think, so fertile and so fast-moving that I have to keep up with myself too sometimes. So there was a beautiful passage in her third book, which is actually called The Edge of the Sea. And I wanted just to read a little bit out of it to begin with, to kind of set the scene for you. She was writing in a very poetic way about the edge of the sea and about tides. Finding a, yeah.
If you want to pick it up, it's on this bench. You can. I think it's easier to read along. Yeah, in German as well.
She is describing her experience of a small rock pool. In Scotland, we can call them rock pools. I think in America, it's tide pool, or even a fairy pool. So it's a moment. These paintings here are called Rock Pool 1 and 2, because in my actual studio, it's becoming like this cave of floating kind of parts. So I'll read you the small paragraph. And so I knelt on the wet carpet of sea moss and looked back into the dark cavern that held the pool in a shallow basin. The floor of the cave was only a few inches below the roof, and a mirror had been created in which all that grew on the ceiling was reflected in the still water below. Under water that was clear as glass, the pool was carpeted with green sponge. Grey patches of sea squirts glistened on the ceiling, and colonies of soft coral were a pale apricot colour. In the moment when I looked into the cave, a little elfin starfish hung down, suspended by the merest thread, perhaps by only a single tube foot. It reached down to touch its own reflection, so perfectly delineated that there might have been not one starfish, but two. The beauty of the reflected images and of the limpid pool itself was the poignant beauty of things that are ephemeral, existing only until the sea should return to fill the little cave. So yeah, it's really a moment in time that only exists before the tide comes swooshing back in again and changes the whole little environment, which is a good way to start for our talk about this exhibition.
Ich wurde gebeten, ein paar Dinge auf Deutsch zu sagen, wenn sie nicht verständlich wären, aber ich sehe in Ihren Augen nur Verständnis. Also ich glaube, Sie haben alles mitbekommen. Dieses Buch von Frau Carson war sehr erfolgreich, nicht nur im englischsprachigen Raum. Es ist in 29 Sprachen übersetzt gewesen. Es war eine Serie im New Yorker gleichzeitig und das hat, glaube ich, damals eine neue Erzählform zwischen Fiction und Non-Fiction hervorgebracht, was viele Leute sehr berührt hat. May I ask something about this book? Because I think it really opens some new ways of dealing with nature in a way of writing that's both fiction and non-fiction at the same time, because she has a very poetic way of putting things into words which are actually natural observations. So it was also popular in Germany and everywhere. It was translated everywhere. And what is the modernity or the importance for now?
Well, I think we can, I suppose we can maybe get tired of always having to think about, being told to think about the environment and not actually thinking of the pure beauty and small moments that we can have with it. And it becomes incredibly scientifically talked about and argued about, and this brings it back to maybe a very personal experience of nature.
And speaking about the personal thing about it, you were born and raised in Elgin, which is a beautiful part of Scotland.
Yes.
I went to the internet today and saw some YouTube clips. And of course, it's famous for its whiskey, of course, but there's also a beautiful cathedral, a ruin, and you can see the sea everywhere from...
Yes.
So what does that mean to you? I mean, it's the first time that I actually see an autobiographical aspect in your work revealed.
Oh, that's true. Well, I think even though I've been away from Scotland now for 25 years, it's still coming back into the work. I can remember going to the fairy pools with my granny and trying to find things in the pools on a very dark, grey day. But the pool for me is not only a childhood kind of moment, but it's also a kind of, they're called nurseries in themselves, these rock pools. So it was this idea of something that looks very dark and slimy, but it's also very magical, and there's lots of life in it. So maybe a little bit like Scotland too. But yeah.
Should I add to that? Yeah. There was also another, what you read was from a chapter called The Marginal World, which I think is very apropos to your work as well, which allows us to explore this marginal world through your artwork that is both has an ephemeral quality as well that you mentioned, and unclear margins, unclear boundaries. And there was one other, you let me peek at this book before our talk, there was one other line I loved where she said, "The edge of the sea remains an elusive and indefinable boundary." And that, I wondered if that also resonated for you.
Well, in my work there's lots of surfaces and things hidden behind the surfaces. I love not having a surface that is completely closed. The surface will have something that you can peek through behind it to see something else suggested. Also, the marginal kind of ephemeral. Is it a painting? Is it a sculpture? Is it solid? Is it taken apart? Is it put back together again? How are these things made? Hopefully it's always kind of escaping myself and it's escaping the viewer. How has this been made? I'm not sure what this object might be, kind of thing. And I've also used in some of the small box sculptures that are the actual margins of the paintings that have fallen off, and I've kept the margins and all the scraps and made them and stuck them onto different paintings as well.
Darf ich das kurz noch übersetzen? Also sie hat wirklich die Dinge, die sie rausgeschnitten hat aus ihren Gemälden, aufgehoben, um daraus Skulpturen zu machen. And this is something that I found very moving to see, because when we met for the first time in 2017 or 18, I was asking you if you wanted to make sculptures beside the book sculptures. Mm-hmm. And you were thinking of that, but there was not an idea there that you have on hand. So that all came within these past years. And how wonderful to use the elements that are actually created in the process of making something else, because
definitely
this year it's all about the cycle of life.
Yes.
Somehow it also touches the creation
That's
of the
true,
work,
yeah.
diese Art von zyklischem Kommen und Werden und Vergehen, was ihre Naturbetrachtungen ausdrückt. Das hat man jetzt auch in der Machart ihrer Kunstwerke.
Yeah.
And I can, the cycle of life, but also the cycle of the tides. We're talking about rock pools, or in American English we say tide pools. And so that once again the idea of the unresting constant circle or cycle comes back. And you, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's just reminding me that I can never think that suddenly I'll have a new idea that's what I'll make. The work comes from the work, and I can't just suddenly have an idea in my head. It doesn't work like that. The work has to come from me making something, and it'll lead me on to having a new idea. So it's taken 7 years since our last discussion, Daniel, and I knew it would gradually come, but I couldn't jump too far all in one go. It had to feel right. And I think with talking about how the paintings from January and my show in Paris have fed into these pieces very naturally, because all the water I was pouring over the surfaces from them, I was absorbing and making into the works, sticking them on and making the sponge paintings downstairs from all of that.
Maybe that's a good time to actually go back and start with this exhibition and your thinking for it. We understand that this author and her books are central to your inspiration, but maybe do you want to kind of take us through a little bit what we're seeing here?
Yeah, so in the first room you have paintings which are more similar to these ones, which was my plan at the beginning of January, when Karsten very kindly asked me to have a show within the next 9 months, and that I wouldn't be able to use any of the work I already had just made. I nearly said, no, Karsten, I don't think I can do that. But then I thought about it again, and I thought, this is perfect. It's so exciting to be able to have a show within the next 7 months. I was already up to speed in January. I just produced my new work, and I had all this flotsam and jetsam in the studio, and I thought, this is perfect. It's going to be just the right moment for this creation of the next show. So it was a really cruel but good idea of his to show me in September. So I lost the thread. So the first, the paintings were kind of mainly all supposed to be like these ones, these 2, 3 at the beginning. I was going to do a series of these. But as soon as I started making these, I started making these at the same time, because all the scraps from these were on the floor lying in big pools. And I wanted to make these paintings which were completely different from many things I'd done before, because they're not cut surfaces anymore. They're using the fragments from these paintings, and having, as Devorah kind of made the connection, my own little kind of rock pool cave is my studio, and I'm picking bits out of it now and making all these new things from it. So I was, dicing with death in a way in the studio, because I was trying to make these work, knowing that I only had a few months, but still really going for it. And my husband would come in and said, like, should you not be finishing some pieces by now? And I was still messing around with these very messy things, thinking, am I crazy? Are these going to work? And luckily, I managed to pull them to the moment where, for me, they started coming alive, and and really making sense with what had happened before. They weren't just a complete jump. They're something that was a natural progression, almost a negative and a positive of each other.
And I also remember you saying that in moments like the one you just described, where you decide to experiment with something new, that is when you actually feel most, I think, free. You were saying, despite the risk, despite the fact that you only had a few months, you went for it. You went for this new direction, and this is a bit of a turning point, as you were saying, Daniel, this whole show. So this is a historic moment that you're witnessing in your practice, that you were maybe a little bit afraid, but went for it anyway, and that was where you felt almost most comfortable, or how would you?
I think I owe it to myself, and also owe it to whoever sees these pieces once they leave the studio, to show something that I feel excited making. And that always has to be a development or something new, or breaking through new territories within my work. So as soon as I started making, I was feeling really excited, and I thought, well, this is what I have to do, hoping that they would work. But it's great having Karsten, because he doesn't even bother me about it, and he kind of was taking maybe a risk, but I really feel that he almost did it deliberately to push me to make these pieces, and it's a great kind of relationship there, I think, too.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. I mean, that a gallerist has some creative input. I mean, it used to be like that, with Kahnweiler and you know, these legendary gallerists, but you don't hear these stories very often.
I think it's having someone kind of giving you the confidence, maybe very quietly, never directive in any way, but still thinking, wow, so maybe there's something, you know, maybe he's right. And that will make me feel very strong and excited as well.
If I can come up with some other memory, when we were looking at your work back then, there were, you know, paintings that were not just ripped up completely. You said sometimes, I'm asking myself, do I really have to do that to them? Why can't I just let them be?
Yes.
But there was a kind of insecurity if your painting was worthy enough to be shown without this process of being ripped up. Exactly. Also sie hat damals Angst gehabt, ihre Bilder so zu zeigen. Jetzt müsste sie vorher noch einmal zerstören. Und nicht der Zerstörungsprozess ist ja Teil der Schöpfung. Creative process means destruction. In any case, every artist tells you that. You buy a canvas, and the minute you put paint on it, you destroy something and you create it. Every artist knows that. But with your work, of course, it's essential. How did it come, you know, that you finally decided that I can do autonomous painting without?
Yeah, well, it's still not really just painting, because I'm still using the elements of the cut work. But they are, for me, they've always been paintings. This is a painting. I like the fact that people don't quite know what to call them, but I think things just, sometimes you have to be patient as well, and sometimes the first idea is not going to work. And maybe it'll be within the next year or the next month that you'll find a scrap on the floor that will work with something else. So you'll leave something in the corner of the studio and you think it's a piece of trash, and then you'll bring it back into another piece 6 months later and it's exactly what you needed. So it's all about bringing everything into the same room and creating this kind of maybe alchemy with it all until it hits the right chord for me.
Yeah, maybe we can continue kind of going through the important elements to this exhibit, because you mentioned these works here, and I'm not sure how clear it was for people that you almost were using and creating your own kind of literal actual pool in your studio, which is back to, again, the tide pools or the rock pools, but there was almost a sea on the floor, and maybe, because I'm not sure if that was clear.
Yeah. They were saying to a couple that arrived earlier how messy my studio is, and it actually was getting extremely smelly as well, because this damp floor, which is looking extremely beautiful, was beginning to smell like clothes when you leave them too long in the washing machine. But there was this pool creating, and it was getting more and more interesting as I was making the other paintings. So as soon as my show was up in January, I knew exactly what I would be using for this show. And yeah, they were really like rock pools. Because I actually was making the rock pool type things before I came across the paragraph from the book. But when I came back to her third book and she was speaking about these rock pools, I think, wow, that's really makes me feel like these are the rock pools. But then there's the screen as well we could talk about too, because that's again using scraps and
So I'm fascinated. This is also a departure.
Yeah.
There are two main areas, I think, where you are three actually. You have these paintings behind us that are completely different from what you were doing shortly before.
Yeah.
And the paravent, which is the screen in the back.
Yeah.
And downstairs you have these sponge paintings, which we'll also have to talk about. But do you want to, so it's the title of the screen is Paravent in French.
Yeah, so I'm sure maybe a lot of you might know, but screen in French is paravent, which means through the wind or by the wind, which is always maybe present in quite a few of my pieces, where things can look as if they've been disturbed by a breeze or the wind carries some seeds through the air. I was wanting to do a double-sided, more sculptural piece as well for a long time, because when I make these types of paintings, they look beautiful when they're in the middle of the room and when you can have light passing through them and you can see both sides of them. I like the fact of the screen as an unfolding, almost like accordion book, again, back to the pages and reading through a landscape, reading time-based through a composition. But mainly it was to be able to see different facets and different sides and have real experience of walking around it, seeing things behind it, seeing things through it. When you're looking at the actual scraps of canvas that I've taken from different things, it's all been put together, squashed. It looks a bit messy, but its nature is very messy. It's maybe more of a contemporary, slightly wild but hopeful perception of a landscape or a garden.
Can I come up with a question about paravent?
Yes.
Because a paravent is usually used to get undressed behind it.
Yes.
So I could imagine a movie scene, for example, with this paravent. Somebody's getting undressed in a very erotical way. And
Yes,
it's beautiful.
yes.
Would you actually use it? Is it usable?
No. It wasn't really. I mean, part, of course, of the history of the paravent is that revealing and hiding things. And I think of course, it has that history about it. But I think it's also not only that, but it's also was a social divide as well in early China and Japan, where they would use it to hide the domestics from the nobility, or they would also just put it, the very first use, I think, of the screen was just stop bad spirits and drafts, and it was insulation, but also bad spirits from coming into your abode. But yeah, the whole idea of peeking through and the fact that there could be a person getting undressed behind it, and we were talking about with Deborah, was the fact that all that's keeping you separate is a very thin layer of something, a very thin barrier, or as you were saying, a kind of border of something.
The whole idea of the metamorphosis is very important if you talk about sea life.
Yes.
Because there are fish that don't stay as they are. They change. For example, the squid. Die Qualle zum Beispiel ist so ein Tier, was nie in einem Endzustand existiert. It's always in between. being
Yes,
something.
yes,
So
yes.
this is, I think, very essential when when I see your work.
Yeah.
And now I have this association of your the sea and the seascape. I see them now as seascapes. It's a modern version of this very old traditional genre of the seascape. What is your comment?
Yes, that's fantastic. We were talking today about how screens have been treated through history, and I wanted it to be a very basic structure, and it's made of wood, like the first screens were always made from wood as well. It's treating the landscape or sea life, and how to read things differently as well. I think I wanted to portray that we're faced with a bombardment of news that we need to view from different aspects, and hopefully with the screen, as you walk around it, you will have a few surprises. As you go around, you'll see the backside of the piece of canvas that you didn't think was a completely different colour from another angle. So it could be also connected with how we read things as well. And
zusammengefasst, also man darf es doch nicht benutzen, um sich dahinter auszuziehen. Das wollte ich jetzt erstmal wissen. Ansonsten haben Sie die ganze Geschichte des Paravents als soziale Trennung mit thematisiert. Interessant.
And as you were saying, it really invites us to walk around it. It's almost telling us to move around it, and it adds movement in doing that. And as we look at it, and as you walk around it, the object itself appears to move because of the two-sided cuts and slats, which is often, I think, how you play and create and add that movement and that life in your works. And I actually looked up paravent in Italian. Maybe some of you know it means against the wind. But I was thinking, like you, that it's through the wind in French, by. But it's supposed to block the wind. And you have subverted that. And instead of being something against it, you're inviting the wind with these cuts. And a lot has been said about your incisions, and you're known for that. And maybe some of you here know her work well already, but there's a lot to say about your incisions. But in this paravent, I also think of the wind going through those, as I said, those incisions and making a sound, which is what I wanted to mention that to you about the musical aspect to your work. The rhythm, you have rhythmic cuts, and as you make them, you're listening to music and you create a beat, a pulse. And do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I mean, I think the whole cutting aspect of my work probably needs to be questioned or explained from my point of view. I mean, I don't just slice through it, I'm taking pieces off. So you're taking a shape out of the painting. And for me, this is a kind of constant structure running through the pieces, like a pulse or a heartbeat or an energy that is continuing. It's also giving me a structure that I can break up and work against, a bit like a kind of minimal structure that then I can use to see what flows over that. And so there's something very rigid and time-based and music, maybe rhythm-based, but then it will help me break it apart. It's something that I want to break apart afterwards, like improvising in... I used to cut up music scores as well. At the very beginning of 15, 20 years ago, I've got some pieces of cut up music scores. I have played music not very well in the past, but some musical instruments. And I love reading music because it's, again, a kind of non-verbal language, like painting or like art. And I think I've always got that idea of the rhythm of a piece. The canon, for example, we were talking about. A canon is, you know, when you start singing and someone starts singing just after, and there's like this kind of echo and circular motion, and the way the two cut surfaces will overlay each other, and kind of like the tide and the movements in the sand will work together like a canon. Or there's syncopation, which is a slightly stuttered offbeat rhythm, which when I overlay these things, nice accidents will happen within that.
Das darf ich kurz nochmal übersetzen und zusammenfassen. Also Musik ist ganz wichtig in ihrem Leben gewesen. Sie hat Flöte gespielt und Saxophon und Klavier. You played the flute, the saxophone and the piano when you were young. Und sie hat auch eben Noten benutzt, um sie aufzuschlitzen. Und die Struktur, die musikalische Struktur ist etwas, wo sie gegenarbeiten kann. Das betrifft auch den Rhythmus bei ihrer Arbeit im Atelier. Also da hat sie immer auch Musik gehört und ist sie sich selbst einen Rhythmus auch gesetzt, um gegen dieses Muster anzuarbeiten. Das muss man
I just found out recently as well that there's somebody here from Landshut, where I actually played my saxophone when I was 15 years old. Because Landshut is the twin town of my birth town in Scotland. So there's a poor gentleman here that might have heard me playing back.
Wonderful. Did you have a brass band where you traveled?
Yeah, it was a kind of youth brass band, and we met up with the equivalent in Landshut and had, I think, my first beer that I've ever drank as well.
Großartig, Blaskapellen, Austausch, Landshut.
Yes. But yeah, music is kind of a great inspiration for me too in the work, and just thinking about verbal and non-verbal language, and the pages of the books that the book pieces that I do become non-verbal. You know, they're non-verbal language that's become more of a feeling or a sensation rather than actual text that you're reading. So it starts from the text, and it's an expression of an emotion of what books and texts can bring you.
Do you, I don't know if people are very familiar with your book pieces, because those were some of your earlier sculptures.
Yeah.
But now I think, am I right in thinking that you have a different feeling about them, and that the new ones are, I think you used the word, they're anchor?
Yeah. So exactly, they're this kind of anchor for me. The piece in the front is called Anchor, but I think it's also where it all began for me really was with the book in 2000 when I visited Paris for the first time as a young student, and I saw the books along the Seine outside, along the river, all the second-hand books by all these French writers and philosophers that I was trying to read, but ended up using them as sketchbooks and using the idea of the knowledge and the worlds and the magic behind the books, at that time. And now I keep going back to them, and I keep bringing themes from books into my work. So it's a real anchor in my creative process, I think, that is always going to be there.
Wir kennen alle in Paris an der Seine diese Secondhand-Buchläden, diesen Holzkästen, und da hat sie sich bedient und die Philosophen mitgenommen, und die blieben dann Inspiration, auch wenn sie nicht ganz durchgehen.
It's funny actually that it was the river and the book. Is that what you just said? Yeah.
Maybe that's a good segue into your less anchored artworks.
Yes.
That are experiments with letting the pigment and the material flow and come to life and go in new directions that are very organic.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of the sponge.
Yes.
Is that okay
Sponge
to call
paintings?
them sponge paintings?
Yeah.
If you could talk about those, how you made them, and also how you balance this idea of letting go of control.
Yeah.
But at the same time, exercising your
your
artistry.
Yeah.
To rein it in.
When I think a fundamental thing about making these pieces is that they are paintings, and that I'm extremely interested in the material of the paint and what makes a good painting and what makes something work. And so when I had these puddles on the floor, I also was sponging up the water because I was worried about how water is becoming such a luxury for so many people. It is a luxury for so many people in the world, but I'm just throwing it all over my studio floor, and it seemed quite a waste, quite not a waste, but just not very nice thing to do. So I would sponge it up. I started sponging it all up to use it again back in the paintings. But because I had my lovely Japanese paper lying around, I decided to try and blot it up with that. And eventually put a sponge on top of the paper, and the paper would absorb almost the history of the paint that I'd used for my paintings in separate in sections. So the sponges had absorbed all the paint that I'd been using over the last few days because the paintings changed, and then they were coming back out again onto the paper.
Sie hat mit Schwämmen hat sie versucht, irgendwie die kostbare Farbe noch ein bisschen zu retten. Und dann hat sie das auf dem teuren Japanpapier abgelegt und dann kamen wieder Zeugnisse dabei heraus über die Farben, die sie eben in den Bildern verwendet hat, und wieder etwas Neues stand daraus.
And also the fact that the paint, talking about guidelines or the rhythm of my cutting, I also like to know what the paint will do just with gravity or just on its own after that. So the paint I would come back the next day and the sponge had absorbed to the edge of the boundary of just where the paper was, and would go along the edge that you'll see downstairs and then follow into another one. And it made me think of how everything is permeable and everything should be free and there's no real boundaries, and all this stuff was doing its own thing and moving around the paper and absorbing all the paint that I'd used over the last week. So it's a very nice free kind of way of working, which was a history of the paintings in a way.
The sponge, after all, is also a sea creature.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And there are also very artificial. You can see the kitchen sponge as well.
Yeah.
So you're not ignoring or trying to brush over the reality of of our industrial modern time.
Yeah. I mean, because you'll see on the paper pieces, as Devorah just said, the actual kitchen sponges I started using too once I'd worked out. And I like the aspect that these kitchen sponges are made of a horrible synthetic produce. So it looks as if these are blooming, corally paintings, but they've been made, and they're on beautiful paper, but they've been made by a very synthetic man-made sponge from my kitchen as well, which is kind of talking about our natural environment as it is today. How can we escape any of this stuff anymore? You know, I think it's very difficult to escape the synthetic in our natural habitat environment that we live in today.
You reminded me, we were going to mention that you were thinking of, quote, the end of nature with this exhibit, and also a sea storm. These are works in a place of, I think, of unrest and movement. Mm-hmm. And so what did you mean by an end of nature, and is that related to what you were just saying?
Yeah, well, you know, the end of nature, we think we're going for a walk in nature, but there's still your telephone in your pocket, or there's some radio kind of wave going through the air. It was funny because there's a really good book about Van Gogh. I think it's called The End of Nature, and it's a writer who's picking up on Van Gogh's more industrial. He's always got workers in his paintings, and there's a picture of a factory with the smoke rising up, and also thinking about Monet's beautiful sunsets. They were only beautiful sunsets because of the smog in London at that time. And thinking about what is really nature and what is a nature drawing. And this was the end of nature for me it is a little bit of that. Maybe it can go backwards now and become nature again. We can, thinking about that, and very interesting writing about Van Gogh, and a new way of looking at Van Gogh's paintings was that he was actually saying, look at these people are being ruined by industrial activities happening, and the pollutants that were coming down the stream that the people were washing their clothes in. It was already happening back then.
But if I could just maybe but at the same time, I don't feel that you are showing that there's an end to.
No, yeah. I'm hopeful. There's hope. I hope.
Okay.
There's color and there's life and there's still things moving against all this synthetic things that are happening. And I think there's a wildness in it that I hope, I have a great faith, maybe in nature fighting against it and finding new evolutions. The jagged edges I use are ways plants find for protecting themselves. So yeah, there's a lot of fragility, but there's a lot of strength as well.
It's so interesting because back then you had sort of like a bad conscience about creating such beautiful things. You know, all these bad things happening in the world, and the art world is full of important stories and content, and you produce beauty. But you mentioned Van Gogh, and we can also think about the fin de siècle British art, for example, the Victorian interest in beauty, and at the same time in a very morbid, decaying depiction. Not only about reality of the 19th century, but also an interest in mythology. You know, I think your work, which is so much about transcendence, about one level and there's something beneath, is very much to do with a view about something fading, going away, about death itself, and at the same time now you find a narrative that actually brings a new reading to this beauty, to this, like an outcry, something that's departing from our life. Also, also diese Schönheit, die sich gleichzeitig verabschiedet, scheint mir jetzt ein richtiges Thema, also ein Inhalt geworden zu sein.
Yes. Totally, and I think maybe it becomes with getting a little bit older, or maturing in your own life as well, or maybe I'm a late mature, but yeah. And I think without hope, then we're nowhere anyway. So they are. I did have a problem with them being very, there's attractive, beautiful pieces. But I'm not hiding away from that anymore, because it's not really just about that. I can't help myself making them like that. But there's still the cut, and there's still the scar, or the washed throughness of them, or the broken parts, or the utter fragility of some of the things that are, as you said, just about to disappear, or hanging like a thread from a thread, to existence, really.
Haben Sie Fragen vielleicht? Gerne auch in allen Sprachen, die wir noch alle sprechen. Französisch, Englisch, Deutsch. Bitte schön.
Yeah.
I would be interested, how long it takes for you to finish a picture?
It's a bit like asking how long is a piece of string, because when I start off a painting, each painting is almost like a new voyage, a new trip. But some of them can be relatively quick. I mean, if I'm lucky, I'd love them to go to plan. Then it would maybe be 2, 3, 4 weeks. But sometimes I leave them and I'll move on to make other ones, or make a small piece in between so that I can have time to go away from this painting and come back to it. But I am a bit of a workaholic, and I work very intensely, so I can work quite fast as well. But it's a funny question, how long does it take? And I always wonder, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I like to see that maybe that there's been some work there, and there's definitely the hand has been in it, but it doesn't not mean that something that's done quickly isn't important either. I like, that's what we're talking about, the magic of an artwork. Something can be done in a second and it looks alive and wonderful, and then something can take really, really a long time and it can look wonderful too. So, yeah.
And you're, in a way, preparing every second and every day of your life for each work that then erupts from there.
It's been 25 years, I suppose, of error and luck and work all together, I suppose.
Noch andere Fragen vielleicht? Miriam.
Did you take pictures when you had your studio?
Yeah, there are some, yeah. I should have taken more, but yeah, there are some. It looks really messy. Really. And you know, your feet stick to the ground, and the smell was really getting to me after a while. I said, I'm going to have to tidy this, you know, I'm going to have to start again, but I knew I couldn't because I wanted to use the materials, so yeah. I've got a few pictures, yeah.
And did you have like containers for the water?
No, that's why it's all started smelling, because it was on the floor, and the floor was kind of... I have plastic sheets on the floor to stop the water going through to the wood, but the water was going underneath the plastic and getting stuck underneath the plastic, so that was what it was starting to smell. But it was also good because it was all sticking to the plastic, and I was ripping off parts, and it was getting really fun and interesting and messy, yeah.
Also die Fotos werden wir noch sehen von der Überschwemmung, in schönen Tanks, die sie da aufgebaut haben. Und gibt es noch andere Fragen?
Are you asking for other? One thing we didn't get to that,
Yeah.
if you want to say, maybe people are shy to ask, but if the audience here doesn't know too much about your thinking behind the incisions,
Yeah.
I love to hear you talk about it. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more.
So it's talking about the incisions, and they started with the books. So it was wanting, like Daniel just said, just trying to get beyond the surface and almost falling through the hole as well, and trying to find out if there's anything behind this surface that's a dimension in a way. So, you know, there could be many dimensions, different sides to something, and a kind of this energy. Why does a heart start beating? Why does life exist? You know, how does it start? How does it stop? And for me, the incision is trying to find out what is behind something. Is that what I said the last time? It was.
Yeah.
And I would like to go back to what you said about growing up in this beautiful village or a little town of 20,000 inhabitants. It sounded like you were attracted and frightened by the sea at the same time.
Yeah.
So could you just explain about that? Because I think that's very important.
Yeah,
this ambiguity between...
Definitely. Well, you are frightened when it's like -20. The sea is not warm, and it's very loud as well. The sea, where I'm from, it crashes against lots of stones, and it's a very powerful element, I suppose. Also, lots of people worked offshore, you know, on the oil rigs from where we're from as well. And it can be a very difficult life, and it can be a very lonely. I've got friends, parents who have had to do that job. So it kind of also brings in this element of an industrial oil, and it's also the very beautiful, tranquil part of life. But there's other stuff that goes on, and it's scary and big and.
And also in the Carson book, I mean, it starts with the creation of an island or something. Because the sea is so powerful, it even builds up something like an island. So it's...
And I think it was just after the World War II that it was written, and I think they hadn't really realised the importance of the sea to the Earth's welfare, and she was maybe as well, for us in the scientific view, trying to make people who didn't believe so much in science follow her along, and as well, people who are maybe more believing in religion would also find connections with her writing. I think so. I mean, and that's good too. It makes it more accessible. But they were also thinking about submarines and the power of the sea and sonar signals. In the sea, and nobody had really known anything about the sea so much up until then, and then it all started after World War II that they realised. And even now, the sea is buffering, trying to clean our world for us. You know, it's it's really working for us a lot.
Still, naturalists tell us that the sea is some unconquered territory, especially the deep sea.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
many creatures we've never heard of.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah.
So, jetzt sind wir am tiefsten Punkt, nämlich an der Tiefsee und der Metapher für die Kreativität selbst. The sea is like creativity itself. It's like a eternal pool. Everything comes from the sea. If we are religious, everything comes from the water. And so, yeah, I mean, we have found a point.
Yes. Yeah. It's huge, immense.
Da ist noch eine Frage.
Yeah, one question. This sort of influence was from the pools or from the European Sea or the Atlantic or the Pacific Sea. But were your works also influenced by Asian tradition in a way? You have a work which looks very much than like a Japanese cutting.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I've
Share that.
yeah. Well, I've always been interested in paper as well, using lots of paper in my work, and the Japanese traditions of paper and woodblock, and using nature in poetry, seasons in poetry. The wave is coming back into this now, and I find that a great inspiration. Especially probably thanks to paper and paper. You think everything's made out of paper and screens, and they're depictions of life, countryside, and the immensity of the mountains and the tiny people in the woodblock cuts and scrolls. Yeah.
And actually Asian screens as well.
Yeah, definitely. The Asian screens come from there as well. Thank you. Anyone else got anything to?
That was very on time.
Yeah, is that good
Exactly
timing,
an hour.
Karina? Yeah.
Very German on time.
Yes, punctual.
Yeah, then, thank you for sharing all your
Yeah.
insight, Deborah, and of course, Georgia. And actually, I have to thank the gallery because this is a
Yes.
museum exhibition for my
Yes.
taste. It's really, you rarely see
Yes, definitely. Thanks
such
to
a great show.
Devorah and Daniel in the gallery, and Mr. Greve, the captain of the ship, as you said.
And thank you for coming.
Thank you.